My FIL called me charity case for marrying his son, so I exposed how I'd been funding their entire family for 3 years and sent his golden boy back to his parents' basement in garbage bags. When I married Alex 7 years ago, his father Richard made it clear I wasn't good enough. My past? I grew up in foster care after my parents died when I was 9, bounced between 12 homes, aged out at 18 with nothing but a garbage bag of clothes, and a determination to never depend on anyone again. Richard loved reminding everyone his son was dating beneath him. At our wedding, he gave a speech about how love makes people do crazy things, how Alex had such a generous heart to see past my background. I was 24 with a nursing degree I'd earned working 3 jobs. Alex was 26, living in his parents' basement, trying to become a professional poker player. But I loved him and thought Richard would warm up once he knew me better. First year was fine. I worked 12-hour shifts at the hospital while Alex played online poker. Made decent money, actually. Enough that we got our own apartment. Richard would visit and comment how lucky I was to have found a man willing to overlook my upbringing. How most men from good families wouldn't take that risk. I'd bite my tongue and serve coffee while he lectured me about proper silverware placement. Then Alex's luck turned. Lost big in a tournament, tried to win it back, lost more. Within 6 months, he'd burned through his savings and maxed out credit cards. I took extra shifts to cover rent. Richard's response was that I should be supporting Alex anyway since he'd elevated my social status by marrying me. The gambling got worse. Alex stopped even pretending to look for work. Said poker was his career, just needed one big win. I was working 16-hour shifts, coming home to find him passed out on the couch surrounded by beer cans and chip bags. Richard would come over, step over the mess, and tell me I wasn't keeping house properly, that his son deserved better than coming home to a dirty apartment, even though Alex hadn't left the apartment in weeks. For 3 years, I carried everything. Every bill, every grocery run, every responsibility while Alex sat on that couch playing poker on his phone. I'd get home from back-to-back shifts to find Richard there, criticizing my cooking, saying his son sacrificed so much marrying someone with no family, no background, no class. He'd say this while Alex nodded along, mouthful of food I'd bought with money I'd earned. Last Christmas was the breaking point. We were at Richard's house, his whole family there. Richard stood up to make a toast. Started talking about sacrifice, about charity, about helping those less fortunate. Then he looked right at me and said Alex was basically a saint for taking in a foster kid with no real family, giving me the stability I'd never had. That I should spend every day grateful someone from a good family chose me despite my past. His relatives all smiled and nodded like he'd said something beautiful. Alex just kept eating his turkey. I stood up, still in my scrubs because I'd worked that morning, and finally said everything. How I'd paid every single bill for 3 years. How Alex hadn't worked a day since 2021. How I'd covered his gambling debts, his car payment, his health insurance. How this foster kid with no family had somehow managed to support his entire family. While being told I was the charity case, Richard's face went red. He started yelling about disrespect, how I didn't understand family values because I'd never had one. That's when I pulled out my phone and showed everyone my bank statements. 3 years of deposits, only my name. Every payment for their house bills when they fell behind. The loan I gave Richard last year that he'd told everyone came from Alex. The room went silent. Richard's wife, Helen, who'd always been cold to me, stared at her husband like she was seeing him for the first time. I turned to Alex and told him to pack his things. He could move back to his parents' basement since they thought he was such a prize. Richard started screaming that I couldn't kick out his son from his own home. I reminded him the apartment was in my name only, had been from the start because Alex's credit was destroyed. I left that dinner and went straight home, packed Alex's stuff in those same garbage bags I'd once carried my life in. When Alex showed up with Richard, demanding to be let in, I handed them the bags through the door. Richard kept yelling about how ungrateful I was, how I'd be nothing without his son. Last week Helen called me. Said she's divorcing Richard after finding out about other lies he's been telling her that made her so cold to me. I sit in my apartment the morning after that dinner, staring at 3 garbage bags by my door. They're the cheap black kind, same ones I carried my whole life in when I aged out of foster care. Now they hold everything Alex owns. My hands won't stop shaking. Part of me wants to cry, but mostly I just feel lighter, like someone took off a heavy coat I'd been wearing for 3 years. The apartment is so quiet without him here. No poker game sounds from his phone. No empty beer cans on the coffee table. No chip crumbs ground into the couch cushions. I walk through each room and it's like seeing my own place for the first time. My phone starts buzzing. Text after text coming in. Richard's sister says she always knew something was off about his stories. His brother calls me ungrateful. His cousin asks if I'm okay. Some relatives are mad, some are supportive, but they all want to talk about what happened. I turn the phone completely off and try to sleep, but my brain won't shut up. It keeps showing me Richard's face when I pulled out those bank statements. How red he got. How his mouth opened and closed like a fish. How everyone at that table went silent and stared at him instead of me for once. I must doze off eventually because when I wake up it's morning and my phone has 63 messages. I don't read them. I call the apartment manager instead. Her name is Carol, and she answers on the second ring. I tell her Alex moved out and I need the locks changed today for safety reasons. She doesn't ask questions, just says she'll send someone over this afternoon. Then she mentions she's seen this kind of thing before with partners who take financial advantage. The way she says it so casual, like it's common, makes something in my chest loosen up. The locksmith comes at 2. He's an older guy who changes both locks in 20 minutes and gives me 3 copies of each key. I put one on my keychain right away. It feels important somehow, like proof this place is really mine. That night, I work my regular shift at the hospital, 12 hours in the ICU. My supervisor, Bridget, takes one look at me during shift change and pulls me aside. She asks if I'm okay, and I don't mean to tell her everything, but it just comes out. The whole story about Alex and Richard and the Christmas dinner. We're on break in the staff room and I'm talking fast. My hands moving and she just listens. Doesn't interrupt or judge. When I finish, she tells me the hospital has an employee assistance program that includes free counseling. She writes down a number on a sticky note and hands it to me. Around 7 that evening, I'm checking on a patient when security calls my extension. They say someone named Alex is in the lobby demanding to see me. My stomach drops, but I tell them he doesn't live with me anymore and I don't want him here. I bring down a copy of my lease showing only my name and a utility bill from last month. Security walks him out while I watch from the desk. He's yelling about how I can't do this, how I'm his wife, how I owe him a chance to explain. But security doesn't care what he's yelling. They just keep walking him toward the exit. Watching them escort him out gives me this surge of confidence I haven't felt in years. Like I have the right to say no and have people listen. 3 days pass. I work, I sleep, I avoid my phone. Then Helen calls. Her voice is shaking when she asks if we can meet for coffee. I think it's a trap at first. Some manipulation from Richard to get me to back down. But something in how broken she sounds makes me say yes. I tell her we can meet at a coffee shop near the hospital, somewhere public with lots of people around. I bring my bank statements in my purse just in case I need to defend myself again. Helen walks in looking 10 years older than she did at Christmas. Her hands shake when she orders tea. We sit at a corner table and she starts talking before I can say anything. She's been going through Richard's financial records. Found out he's been lying to her about money their entire marriage. The loan I gave him last year was just the start. She pulls out credit card statements from her purse and spreads them on the table. Thousands of dollars spent on maintaining appearances while they were drowning in debt. Richard told her the money came from Alex's poker winnings. She believed him because she wanted to believe their son was successful and making good choices. Her apology is raw. She cries while she talks. I realize she was a victim of Richard's lies too, just in a different way. He made her cold to me by telling her I was using Alex, that I was the problem, that I came from nothing and wanted their family's status. She believed him because he's her husband and she trusted him. Now she sees he lied about everything. I don't know what to say, so I just sit there while she cries into her tea. The next week, I call the number Bridget gave me. A woman named Rachel answers. She specializes in financial abuse and works with the hospital's employee assistance program. We meet in her office on my day off. She has a calm way of talking that makes me feel safe. She explains that what Alex and Richard did wasn't just taking advantage. It was systematic exploitation designed to keep me feeling grateful and inferior. They made me think I owed them something for accepting me. Made me work myself into the ground while telling me I should be thankful they let me. Rachel says putting a name to it helps people stop blaming themselves. She's right. Hearing her call it abuse makes me realize I wasn't stupid or weak. I was manipulated by people who knew exactly what they were doing. While all this is happening, Alex starts sending emails. Long ones about how much he loves me and how he'll change. He promises to get a real job and go to gambling anonymous meetings if I just give him another chance. He says he knows he messed up, but he can fix it. Each email is more desperate than the last. I don't respond to any of them, but I save every single one in a folder on my computer. Rachel suggested I keep records of everything in case I need it later. I label the folder divorce evidence on my lawyer's advice, even though I don't have a lawyer yet. I just know I'm going to need one soon. 2 weeks pass and I'm walking to my car after a shift when someone steps out from behind a truck. It's not Richard or Alex. Just some guy in a polo shirt holding a manila envelope. He asks if I'm me, and when I nod, he hands me the envelope and walks away. I stand there in the parking lot holding it while my heart pounds. Inside is a legal document with Richard's name at the top. He's claiming I abandoned Alex and demanding I pay spousal support because Alex became dependent on my income during our marriage. There's a bunch of legal language about marital obligations and how I can't just kick him out without providing for him. I take pictures of every page with my phone and drive straight to the hospital to find Bridget. She reads through it in the break room and tells me to call the attorney she mentioned before. His name is Derek, and his office can see me tomorrow morning. I barely sleep that night reading through the papers over and over. The next morning, I sit in Derek's office and hand him the envelope. He's younger than I expected, maybe late 30s. With reading glasses, he keeps pushing up his nose. He flips through the pages and actually laughs. Not a polite chuckle, but a real laugh that makes me feel less scared. He explains that Richard has no legal standing to demand anything from me. Only Alex could file for spousal support, And even then, it would be difficult given the circumstances. Richard can't sue me on his son's behalf for abandoning a 33-year-old man. Derek asks if I have documentation of the financial situation, and I pull out my phone to show him the folder of bank statements and emails. He nods while scrolling through and says he'll take my case. The retainer fee makes me wince, but he offers a payment plan, and I agree. He assures me that Alex will be lucky to get nothing given what I can prove. I leave his office feeling lighter than I have in weeks. We schedule another meeting for the following week to go through everything in detail. When that meeting comes, I bring printed copies of 3 years of bank statements, credit card bills, and loan documents. Derek spreads everything across his conference table, and we start going through it line by line. That's when things get worse. He points to credit cards I don't recognize and asks if I opened them. I say no, and he shows me they're in my name with my social security number. Alex opened them without my permission and maxed them out. Then Derek finds where Alex made me an authorized user on his destroyed credit cards so my score would tank along with his. There's also a personal loan taken out using my income verification that I never signed for. Each new discovery feels like getting punched. I thought I knew how bad it was, but this is so much worse. Derek explains this isn't just financial abuse anymore. It's identity theft and fraud. He can report this to the credit bureaus and file a police report for the unauthorized accounts. I feel sick sitting there looking at all the ways Alex violated my trust. Derek asks if I'm okay, and I lie and say yes because I need to get through this meeting. We spend 2 more hours documenting everything. By the end, my hands are shaking and I want to throw up. Derek says he'll file for divorce on grounds of financial abuse and fraud. He'll request full separation of assets and no spousal support for Alex. He'll also handle reporting the identity theft and filing the police report. The legal process scares me, but Derek walks through each step with patience. He explains what will happen and when and what I need to do. I sign a bunch of papers authorizing him to act on my behalf. Before I leave, he tells me this will take time, but I have a strong case. I drive home and sit in my apartment staring at the walls. My phone rings and it's Helen. Her voice sounds different from it did at coffee. Stronger somehow. Angry instead of broken. She tells me she's filing for divorce from Richard and moved into her sister's house last week. She found more lies, more gambling, more debts he hid from her. She asks if my attorney would be willing to coordinate with hers, since Richard's lies affected both our cases. I give her Derek's contact information, and she thanks me. After we hang up, I realize Helen and I are both doing the same thing at the same time, both leaving men who lied to us and used us. It feels less lonely knowing I'm not going through this alone. December drags by, and I pick up an extra shift on New Year's Eve. Being busy is easier than sitting home thinking about how I spent last New Year watching Alex play poker on his phone while I worked a double shift. The hospital is quieter than usual. Most of the staff took the holiday off, so it's just a skeleton crew. Around 9, a patient's family brings in homemade cookies for the nursing staff as a thank you. It's such a small gesture, but something about it breaks me. I take the container to the supply closet and start crying. Not quiet tears, but actual sobs that I can't control. Bridget finds me there 20 minutes later, sitting on the floor surrounded by bandages and medical supplies. She doesn't ask what's wrong, just sits down next to me on the floor and stays there until I can breathe normally again. She hands me a cookie and we eat them in silence. At midnight, we hear fireworks outside and she squeezes my hand. 2 weeks into January, my phone rings at 2 in the morning. It's the night security guard from my building. He says Alex is in the lobby drunk and crying and begging to be let up. I pull on clothes and go downstairs. Alex is slumped against the front desk, unshaven and desperate looking. His clothes are wrinkled and he smells like alcohol and sweat. When he sees me, he starts apologizing and saying he'll change and he needs me. The security guard stands ready to call the police if I want. I look at Alex and feel this confusing mix of pity and disgust. Part of me wants to help him because I spent 7 years loving this person. But the bigger part remembers every lie and every maxed out credit card, and every time Richard called me a charity case while Alex nodded along. I tell the guard Alex doesn't live here anymore and I don't want him in the building. Alex starts yelling that I can't do this, and he has nowhere to go. I turn around and walk back to the elevator without responding. The guard escorts Alex out and I watch through the lobby windows as he stumbles down the street. I don't feel good about it, but I don't waver either. A few days later, I get a Facebook message from Constantine. I haven't talked to him since the wedding. He was Alex's best man. The message is long and says he wants to apologize for enabling Alex's behavior over the years. He admits they all knew Alex was living off me, but convinced themselves it was fine because I seemed happy. He says watching me finally stand up for myself made him realize how wrong they all were to stay silent. His honesty makes me uncomfortable, but it also helps me understand how many people saw what was happening and said nothing. I write back thanking him for the apology and leave it at that. The next week, my phone starts ringing from numbers I don't recognize. When I finally answer one, it's Richard's cousin asking me to drop the divorce proceedings and work things out with Alex for the sake of family unity. I hang up and block the number. 3 more calls come from different relatives with the same message. I block each one and then call Derek to tell him what's happening. He says to forward all contact attempts to him, and he'll communicate that everything must go through attorneys now. Enforcing that boundary feels good, even though the calls keep coming for a few more days. In my next therapy session, Rachel has me do an exercise. She asks me to write a letter to my younger self who married Alex 7 years ago. I'm supposed to explain what I wish I'd known back then. I sit there with the pen shaking in my hand, and then I start writing. The letter turns into pages of things I want to tell that hopeful 24-year-old who thought love and hard work could overcome anything. By the end, I'm sobbing so hard I can barely see the paper. Rachel sits quietly while I grieve for the version of myself who didn't know what was coming. When I finish, she asks if I want to mail it, and I say no. I fold it up and put it in my purse to keep as a reminder of how far I've come. Helen and I start meeting for coffee every week. What started as one awkward meeting turns into something regular. We sit in the same corner booth and talk about Richard's manipulation and the lies he told both of us. She tells me stories about their marriage I never knew. How he'd blame her for their money problems while secretly gambling away their savings. How he'd criticize her parenting while refusing to help with Alex. How he made her feel stupid and worthless for 30 years. Our friendship feels strange because she's my ex-mother-in-law, but it's also genuine. We're both dealing with the same man's cruelty, just in different ways. She tells me her divorce is moving forward and Richard is fighting her on everything. I tell her about the identity theft and the credit cards, and she shakes her head like she's not surprised. We make plans to meet again next week, and I realize I actually look forward to these coffee dates. Having someone who understands what Richard is capable of makes me feel less alone in all of this. A few days later, Derek calls to tell me Alex's attorney sent a response. Public defender assigned because Alex can't afford his own lawyer. The offer is simple. Alex waives all claims to any assets or property in exchange for me not pursuing criminal charges for the identity theft and fraud. Derek walks me through what criminal proceedings would mean. Months of court dates and testimony. Reliving everything in front of strangers. Watching Alex potentially go to jail while I still don't get closure. He says this settlement gets me out faster and cleaner. I tell him I need time to think about it. That night, I can't sleep. Part of me wants Alex to face real consequences. Wants him in court explaining to a judge how he stole my identity and destroyed my credit while I worked myself into exhaustion. But another part just wants this over. Wants to stop thinking about him every single day. I text Rachel asking for an emergency session. She fits me in the next morning before my shift. I walk into her office and immediately start crying. Tell her I don't know if I'm being weak by taking the settlement or smart by protecting myself from more trauma. Rachel lets me cry for a few minutes, then asks what I actually want. Not what I think I should want, or what would punish Alex enough. What would help me heal and move forward. I realize I want my life back. Want to stop being the woman Alex hurt and start being whoever I'm going to be next. We talk for the full hour about how my healing doesn't require his punishment. How I can want him to face consequences while also choosing not to be the one who has to enforce them. By the end, I know what I'm doing. I call Derek from the parking lot and tell him to accept the settlement with one condition. Alex has to admit in writing to the financial abuse. Has to sign a document that says exactly what he did. Derek says he'll push for that and thinks Alex's attorney will agree since it keeps everything out of criminal court. The bank appointment happens 3 days later. The representative is a woman in her 50s who's seen my account history and the police report. She walks me through closing every joint account and opening new ones in my name only. Checking, savings, even a new credit card with a low limit to help rebuild my score. She sets up direct deposit for my paychecks and shows me how to create automatic transfers to savings. Something I could never do when Alex had access to drain everything the day it came in. Watching her close those joint accounts feels like watching chains fall off. She hands me new debit cards with just my name printed on them. No Alex listed as joint holder. I sit in my car afterward and just stare at the cards. This money is mine. Only mine. Nobody can touch it without my permission. I drive to the grocery store and buy expensive cheese and good bread and fresh flowers just because I can. Because there's no Alex waiting at home to complain I'm wasting money on unnecessary things. The total comes to $40 and I don't feel guilty at all. Derek calls in late January to say Alex signed the settlement agreement. His written admission is 2 pages long. Every credit card he opened in my name. Every bill he let me pay while pretending to contribute. Every lie he told his family about supporting me. It's all there in black and white with his signature at the bottom. Derek says almost no one will see this document except lawyers and maybe a judge if there are any future disputes. But holding those pages in my hands feels like vindication anyway. Proof I'm not crazy or ungrateful or any of the things Richard called me. Derek files the final divorce paperwork with the court that same day. The waiting period is 60 days before it's officially finalized. I mark April 1st on my calendar with a gold star. My freedom date. Derek warns me Alex might try to contact me during this waiting period and to document everything if he does. I promise I will. Constantine sends me a Facebook message a week later. Says he thought I should know Alex moved back into Richard's basement, working part-time at a fast food place near their house. Constantine saw him there last week and Alex looked terrible. Lost weight, hasn't shaved, barely made eye contact. Part of me feels guilty hearing this. Wonders if I'm being cruel letting him struggle. I bring it up in my next session with Rachel. She reminds me these are consequences of Alex's own choices. I didn't make him gamble away his money. Didn't make him refuse to work for 3 years. Didn't make him commit identity theft. His current situation is the result of his actions, not my cruelty. She says I'm learning to separate compassion from responsibility. I can feel sorry he's struggling while also recognizing I'm not responsible for fixing it. The guilt doesn't disappear completely, but it gets smaller, more manageable. Richard's relatives start calling in early February. His sister, 2 cousins, his brother. All of them want to apologize for how Richard treated me over the years. They admit they always thought his comments were cruel, but didn't want to cause family drama by speaking up. One cousin says she told her husband after every family gathering that Richard was wrong about me, that anyone could see I was working myself to death while Alex did nothing. I accept their apologies politely. Thank them for reaching out. But I don't pretend we're going to be close now. They watched it happen for years. Smiled and nodded while Richard tore me down at every opportunity. Their apologies feel hollow even if they're genuine. I don't owe them my anger, but I don't owe them my forgiveness either. I can acknowledge their regret without letting them back into my life. Helen says this is growth. Learning. I don't have to make everyone comfortable or accept every olive branch extended. Helen tells me over coffee that Richard is desperately trying to reconcile with her. Shows up at her sister's house with flowers. Sends long emails promising he'll change. Says he'll go to therapy and work on his anger and be the husband she deserves. She laughs when she tells me this, but the laugh is bitter. Says she's done believing his promises after 30 years of the same patterns. He promised to stop gambling before. Promised to stop lying. Promised to treat her with respect. None of it ever lasted more than a few weeks. She says watching me set boundaries and stick to them inspired her to do the same. That seeing me refuse to accept crumbs of respect made her realize she deserved more too. We sit there in our corner booth, 2 women who finally stopped accepting what Richard thought we deserved. Her strength helps me maintain my own. Makes me less likely to waver when I feel guilty or tired. Bridget pulls me aside at work in mid-February. Says she's nominating me for a leadership position on our unit. Charge nurse role that comes with a raise and more responsibility. She lists all the reasons I'm qualified. My work ethic, reliability, how other nurses come to me with questions. I stand there feeling like she's talking about someone else. After years of Richard telling me I should be grateful anyone valued me at all, hearing Bridget describe me as a natural leader feels impossible. But she's serious. Already filled out the nomination paperwork. I just need to attend some management training sessions and interview with the nursing director. I accept because saying no would mean letting Richard's voice win. The training sessions start next week. 2 hours every Tuesday evening learning about scheduling and conflict resolution and performance reviews. Skills I never thought I'd need. One of my coworkers sets me up on a date in late February. Says I need to have fun and stop spending every free moment either working or dealing with divorce stuff. The guy is nice enough. Works in IT, likes hiking, recently divorced himself. We meet for coffee and it's awkward from the start. I don't know how to talk about my life without mentioning Alex and the divorce. He doesn't know how to ask about me without it sounding like an interview. But halfway through, he asks what I like to do for fun and actually waits for my answer. Doesn't interrupt or change the subject. Just listens while I talk about wanting to travel someday and maybe take an art class. It's such a small thing, but it feels huge. Someone asking about my interests and caring about the response. We finish our coffee and agree it was nice meeting each other. I don't see him again and he doesn't ask. But I'm glad I went. Glad I tried even though I'm clearly not ready for dating. It showed me what respectful conversation feels like. The credit bureaus send notifications in early March. They reviewed the police report and settlement agreement and removed all the fraudulent accounts from my credit report. The ones Alex opened in my name without permission. My credit score jumps 90 points in 1 month. From 580 to 670. Still not great, but so much better than it was. I watch the number climb on the credit monitoring app and feel like I'm watching my life become mine again. Derek recommended a financial advisor named Lyle, who specializes in helping people rebuild after financial abuse. I meet with him at his office downtown. He's younger than I expected, maybe late 30s, and he doesn't treat me like I'm stupid for letting this happen. Just pulls up my credit report and bank statements and starts making a plan. Pay off this card first because of the interest rate. Keep this account open for credit history. Apply for this secured card in 6 months. He maps out a timeline for getting my score above 700. Shows me how to budget for savings while still living my life. By the end of the meeting, I have actual goals, numbers to hit, and dates to aim for. For the first time in years, I'm planning a financial future that belongs only to me. Early February brings Alex back to the hospital during my evening shift. Security calls my floor to say someone is asking for me at the main entrance. I head down and see him through the glass doors holding a bouquet of roses. He's sober this time, hair combed, wearing clean clothes. Security already has him stopped outside. I tell them he's not allowed to contact me and provide the no-contact agreement from my divorce paperwork. They escort him off hospital property while he keeps trying to explain himself. I watch through the window as he walks to his car, still holding those flowers. The next morning, I call Derek and explain what happened. He files a motion for a restraining order that afternoon. The hearing happens 3 days later. The judge reviews the divorce documents, the no-contact agreement Alex signed, and the security report from the hospital. Takes her less than 5 minutes to grant the restraining order. Alex has to stay 500 feet away from me, my workplace, and my apartment. Derek hands me the signed order and I fold it carefully into my purse. 2 weeks later, I get served with legal papers at work. Richard is suing me for the $15,000 I loaned him last year. His complaint claims it was a gift, not a loan, and I'm harassing him by demanding repayment. I take the papers straight to Derek's office. He reads through them and actually laughs. Says Richard's attorney clearly didn't review the evidence before filing. Derek drafts a countersuit for the full $15,000 plus interest and court costs. Includes copies of the text messages where Richard specifically called it a loan and promised repayment. Also includes the payment plan he agreed to in writing. Richard's attorney withdraws the lawsuit 5 days later without explanation. Helen calls me that evening and we both laugh until our sides hurt at Richard's nerve. She says he's been complaining to anyone who will listen about how I ruined his family. I find a gambling anonymous family meeting that meets Tuesday evenings at a church near my apartment. The first meeting I attend has about 12 people in a circle of folding chairs. Everyone shares stories about supporting someone with a gambling problem. A woman in her 50s talks about covering her husband's debts for 8 years before finally leaving. Another person describes hiding money from their adult son who would steal it for casino trips. My story doesn't sound unusual here. It sounds normal, familiar. When I finish talking, the woman who supported her husband for 8 years reaches across the circle and squeezes my hand. Tells me I'm brave for leaving after only 3 years. That it took her 8 to find that strength. I don't feel brave, but I start to believe maybe I am. Helen's divorce from Richard finalizes in mid-February. The judge awards her the house since Richard's financial deception was well documented by that point. Richard has to move into a one-bedroom apartment across town. Helen calls me the day the decree arrives, crying so hard I can barely understand her. But they're relief tears, not sad ones. I suggest we celebrate with dinner at the Italian place downtown she always wanted to try, but Richard said was too expensive. My treat since her finances are still getting sorted out. We sit at a corner table and order wine and pasta and tiramisu for dessert. Helen tells me she feels like she can breathe for the first time in 30 years. Our friendship has become real, built on actual respect instead of forced family connection. March 1st arrives and my 60-day waiting period ends. Derek's office emails me the final divorce decree at 9 in the morning. I print it out at work and stare at it during my lunch break. Officially divorced. Officially free. I stop at the store on my way home and buy a simple black frame. Hang the decree on my bedroom wall like it's a diploma. That evening, I take myself to the nicest steakhouse in the city. Order a filet and a baked potato and a glass of red wine. The waiter brings a basket of warm bread and I eat it slowly, not rushing through the meal. After dinner, I buy a bottle of champagne from the liquor store. Drink it alone in my apartment, toasting my freedom with each sip. My tax refund hits my bank account in mid-March. Filing as single means I get back almost $4,000. Money that's entirely mine since Alex can't touch it. I transfer $3,000 to my savings account and use the rest to open a separate emergency fund at a different bank. Lyle helps me set up a retirement account through my hospital's benefits program. I start contributing $200 per paycheck. It's money I'm actually saving for my own future for the first time in years. Alex's mother contacts Helen in late March asking if she can apologize to me in person. Helen calls to ask if I'm willing to meet. I'm not sure I want to open that door. But Helen offers to be there as a buffer and I finally agree. We meet at a coffee shop on a Saturday afternoon. Alex's mother looks older than I remember, tired around the eyes. Her apology is genuine and painful to hear. She believed everything Richard told her about me. Believed I was using Alex. Believed their son was the generous one. She cries while apologizing, and I believe her regret is real. I accept the apology but make clear I don't want ongoing contact with Alex's extended family. She nods and thanks me for meeting her at all. Constantine calls me in early April with an update I didn't ask for. Alex got fired from his fast food job for showing up drunk to his shift. He's spiraling badly, according to Constantine. Living in Richard's apartment now since Richard's basement wasn't an option anymore. Constantine asks if I'd be willing to talk to Alex about getting help. I tell him no. Firmly. That chapter is closed. I mention it to Rachel at my next therapy session, and she validates my decision completely. Reminds me I can wish Alex well from a distance without making his recovery my responsibility, that I already spent 3 years trying to save him. My supervisor calls me into her office the second week of April. Says she has good news. I'm being promoted to charge nurse with a significant raise. Bridget tells me I earned this through my performance and leadership. Not because anyone felt sorry for me. The raise is substantial enough that I can finally stop working constant overtime and still save money. I thank her and walk back to the nurse's station feeling lighter than I have in months. Richard shows up at my apartment building on a Thursday evening in late April. The security guard calls up to my apartment saying someone is demanding to see me. I come down to the lobby and see Richard through the glass doors. He's yelling about what I did to his family, about how I destroyed everything. The security guard already called the police. 2 officers arrive within 10 minutes and arrest Richard for violating the restraining order that covers both him and Alex. I watch them put him in the back of the patrol car. Helen calls me an hour later, apologizing for his behavior. Says she had no idea he was planning to show up at my building. I tell her it's not her fault. that Richard makes his own choices. She sounds tired but relieved he'll face actual consequences this time. The police officer who took the report about Richard's arrest recommends I file for an extended restraining order given how his behavior keeps getting worse. I meet with Derek the following week, and he helps me prepare the paperwork, gathering all the documentation of Richard's harassment over the past months. The court hearing happens 2 weeks later, and the judge reviews everything: the police reports and witness statements and the pattern of violations. She grants a 3-year restraining order without hesitation, stating that Richard's escalating behavior shows clear disregard for previous orders. Richard has to attend anger management classes and stay 500 feet away from me, my workplace, and my home. Walking out of that courthouse, I feel safer than I have in months, knowing there are actual legal consequences now. If he comes near me again, I stop by the community center near my apartment that same afternoon and sign up for a pottery class that meets twice a week on my days off. It's something I'd always wanted to try, but never had time or money for when I was working constant overtime to support Alex. My first class is that Saturday, and I'm terrible at it, my bowl collapsing into a lumpy mess on the wheel. The instructor is patient and encouraging, showing me how to center the clay and keep my hands steady. By the end of the 2-hour session, my back hurts, and my hands are covered in dried clay, but I've made something that vaguely resembles a bowl. The focus required helps quiet my anxious thoughts, all my attention on the clay spinning under my fingers instead of replaying Richard's threats or worrying about money. I go back the next week and the week after that, slowly improving as I learn to feel when the clay is centered and how much pressure to apply. Creating something with my hands feels therapeutic in a way I didn't expect, watching something take shape that exists only because I made it. Helen calls me in early May, asking if I want to join her sister's book club, saying they meet monthly and she thinks I'd enjoy it. I'm hesitant about meeting new people, but Helen insists they're welcoming and not judgmental. The first meeting is at someone's house, and there are 8 women there ranging from their 30s to their 60s. They're discussing a memoir about someone who rebuilt their life after divorce, and the conversation is thoughtful and kind. When they ask about me, I tell them I'm a nurse and recently divorced, keeping it brief. Nobody pries or asks uncomfortable questions about my past. They ask what kind of books I like and if I've traveled anywhere interesting and what I do for fun. Having a social circle that knows me as myself, rather than as Alex's wife or Richard's daughter-in-law, feels like building a new identity separate from all that history. I leave that first meeting with next month's book, and 3 new friend requests on social media from women who seemed genuinely interested in getting to know me. Constantine texts me in mid-May saying he has an update about Alex if I want to hear it. I tell him I'm okay with updates as long as he understands I'm not reaching out to Alex directly. He says Alex finally entered a residential treatment program for gambling addiction and alcoholism, a 90-day program that focuses on both issues together. I'm genuinely glad Alex is getting help because I never wanted him to suffer. I just couldn't keep sacrificing myself to save him. I mention it to Rachel at my next therapy session, and she validates that it's healthy to hope for his recovery while maintaining boundaries, that those two things aren't opposite to each other. I can want Alex to get better while also protecting myself from being pulled back into his chaos. A guy from my pottery class named James asks me to get coffee after class one Saturday in late April. He's around my age, and we've chatted a few times while waiting for the kiln to heat up. We go to a coffee shop down the street and end up talking for 3 hours about art and travel and our favorite books. He tells me about a trip he took to Iceland last year, and I tell him about wanting to visit national parks someday. When he asks about my past, I give him the brief version. Divorced recently after my ex had gambling problems. He doesn't pry for details or make pitying faces. He tells me about his own divorce 2 years ago and how he's learned what he wants in a relationship now. We agree to see each other again and exchange numbers before heading home. Derek calls me the first week of May saying Richard's anger management instructor contacted him with concerning information. Richard was removed from the program for threatening behavior toward other participants, apparently getting into an argument during a session and making physical threats. This counts as another restraining order violation since completing the program was part of the court order. Derek files the violation report, and Richard ends up with a weekend jail sentence. 48 hours that the judge hopes will make him take the orders seriously. Helen calls me after she hears about it, sounding tired but satisfied. She says Richard is finally facing real consequences for his actions after a lifetime of bullying his way through problems without anyone stopping him. I check my bank account on the last day of May and realize I've hit a milestone I never thought I'd reach. 6 months of expenses sitting in my emergency fund. Exactly what financial advisors recommend, but something that felt impossible when I was supporting Alex. I text Lyle with a screenshot, and he calls me back immediately to congratulate me. We set up a meeting to discuss next steps, and he starts talking about saving for a down payment on a house. The idea of owning property feels both impossible and thrilling, like something that happens to other people but maybe could happen to me too. James and I have been seeing each other regularly for 2 months, coffee dates turning into dinner dates turning into weekend hikes. He asks me one Saturday in late June if I want to be his girlfriend, using the actual word like we're in high school. I'm terrified of making another mistake after Alex, of missing red flags or ignoring problems. I talk to Rachel about it at my next appointment, and she encourages me to trust my instincts. James is employed full-time as an accountant, financially stable with his own apartment, and treats me like an equal partner who has valuable thoughts and opinions. He splits checks without making it weird, and asks about my work and remembers details from previous conversations. I text him that evening and say yes. Helen calls me in early June, sounding excited in a way I haven't heard from her before. She got a job at a nonprofit organization that works with domestic violence survivors, something she's always wanted to do, but Richard never allowed her to work outside the home. She starts the following week and calls me after her first day, absolutely energized by the work and the feeling of independence that comes with her own income. We meet for dinner to celebrate her first paycheck in June, two women sitting across from each other who rebuilt their lives after financial abuse. She tells me about the women she's helping, and I tell her about my savings milestone, and James. We toast with wine to new beginnings that we created ourselves, instead of waiting for someone to give us permission. Constantine's wedding is in mid-July, and I get an invitation in the mail in June. I'm surprised he's inviting me given everything with Alex, but the invitation is addressed just to me with a note saying he values our friendship, I RSVP yes, and show up to the ceremony on a sunny Saturday, wearing a new dress I bought specifically for this occasion. Alex is conspicuously absent, and Constantine mentions during the reception that Alex is still in treatment, extending his stay for another 60 days. Several of Alex's old friends approach me during the reception to apologize for not speaking up sooner about his behavior, saying they knew something was wrong but didn't want to interfere. I accept their apologies politely, but realize while talking to them that I don't need their validation anymore. I know my own worth now, not because anyone told me I was valuable, but because I proved it to myself by surviving and rebuilding. I dance with James and eat cake and celebrate Constantine's happiness without feeling bitter about my own failed marriage. Driving home that night, I think about how different my life looks compared to a year ago, how I'm not just surviving anymore, but actually building something I want. A week after Constantine's wedding, I get a friend request on Facebook from an account I don't recognize. The profile picture is some generic sunset photo and the name is Jennifer Matthews. But something feels off about it. I accept it out of curiosity and immediately get a message about how I destroyed a good family, how I'm a gold digger who manipulated everyone, how I should be ashamed of myself. The writing style is familiar in a way that makes my stomach turn. I screenshot everything and send it to Derek, who forwards it to the police handling Richard's restraining order case. Turns out creating fake accounts to harass someone you have a restraining order against is a violation that judges take seriously. Richard gets hauled back into court and the judge adds another 6 months to his restraining order plus 30 days in jail. I feel tired satisfaction watching the system actually work for once instead of just telling me to ignore him. James suggests meeting Helen for dinner in August since they haven't been introduced yet, and I'm nervous about mixing these parts of my life. We meet at a casual restaurant and I watch them talk about their shared instinct to protect me. Helen mentioning how guilty she feels for believing Richard's lies for so long. James tells her about his own mother's experience with financial abuse, and they bond over wanting to make sure I never go through that again. Having a partner who wants to know the people important to me instead of isolating me from them feels healthy in a way I didn't know relationships could be. I'm learning what respectful partnership actually looks like, how it's supposed to feel when someone values your connections instead of trying to cut them off. A woman named Sarah reaches out through a mutual friend in late August, asking if she can talk to me about my situation with Alex. We meet for coffee and she tells me about her husband who hasn't worked in 5 years while she supports their family, how he tells her she's lucky he stays with her despite her flaws. I share my story and watch her face change as she realizes she's not alone or crazy. I give her Derek's contact information and Rachel's name, telling her about the employee assistance program at her workplace that might offer free counseling. Helping someone else feels like turning my pain into purpose, like maybe surviving this nightmare means I can help other people escape their own. Constantine calls me in September to say Alex completed his treatment program and is doing well, working a steady job at a warehouse and attending meetings regularly. I'm genuinely happy for him from a distance, hoping he stays on this path and builds a real life for himself. I don't reach out because I've learned that wishing someone well doesn't mean I have to be part of their journey. He respects my boundaries by not contacting me directly, which feels like growth for both of us in different ways. I apply for mortgage pre-approval in October on Lyle's recommendation, expecting to maybe qualify for a small condo. The approval letter comes back higher than I expected, thanks to my rebuilt credit and stable income from the promotion. Lyle helps me start looking at actual houses, small places with yards in quiet neighborhoods where I could build equity instead of paying rent forever. The idea of owning property excites me in a way I didn't think possible 2 years ago when I was drowning in Alex's debts. Looking at houses feels like planning a future that's actually mine instead of just surviving day to day. Richard sends a letter through his attorney in November requesting I drop the restraining order so he can attend family events where I might be present, like his daughter's upcoming birthday party. Derek responds that I'll consider it after the full 3-year term expires if Richard completes all court-ordered programs and maintains 0 violations. I'm done accommodating his convenience or making myself smaller so he can be comfortable. He chose to harass me, and now he gets to live with the consequences of that choice. James and I take a weekend trip to a coastal town in early December, my first real vacation in 5 years. We walk on the beach and eat at small restaurants. And I realize I'm genuinely happy, not just relieved to be away from bad situations. I can laugh freely and make plans for next year without fear of someone draining my bank account or telling me I'm ungrateful. We talk about maybe taking a longer trip next summer, and I don't panic about the cost or worry about coming home to financial disaster. This is what normal relationships feel like, where both people contribute and plan together. I find a perfect small house in late December, 2 bedrooms with a fenced yard in a neighborhood near a park. The inspection comes back clean, and I make an offer that gets accepted. The closing is scheduled for mid-January, almost exactly 1 year after I started divorce proceedings with Derek. Helen helps me pick out paint colors for the kitchen, and James offers to help with renovations on weekends. I'm building a life I actually want, instead of just surviving the life someone else forced on me. On Christmas Eve, I host dinner at my apartment for Helen, James, Bridget, and 3 nurses from my unit who don't have family nearby. We cook together and laugh, and no one mentions Richard or Alex or my foster care background. I'm surrounded by people who chose to be here because they value me, not because I'm useful to them or because I'm funding their lifestyle. We play board games and drink wine, and it feels like the family I built myself instead of the one I was told I should be grateful for. The house closing happens on January 15th, and I get the keys to my first home. Standing in the empty living room with afternoon sunlight coming through the windows, I think about the garbage bags I once carried my life in and the garbage bags I packed Alex's life into. I'm not that scared foster kid or that used-up wife anymore. I'm someone who survived and built something real. Someone who owns property and has healthy relationships and knows her own worth. The living room needs paint, and the bathroom needs updating, and none of it is perfect. But it's mine in a way nothing has ever been mine before I spend the next weekend setting up my home office in the smaller bedroom. The divorce decree gets framed and hung on the wall next to my nursing degree, and the photo from my promotion ceremony last year. 3 documents that represent 3 different kinds of freedom I had to fight for. James stops by with lunch one Saturday and sees the wall of frames. He stands there looking at them for a minute, then just nods and asks if I want help assembling my desk. He gets it without me having to explain that I'm proud of surviving, not bitter about what I went through. That's the difference between him and Alex right there. Derek calls me in February with news that Richard contacted him requesting a meeting to apologize in person. Says he's been in therapy and wants to make amends. I don't even have to think about it. I tell Derek to respond that I don't need his apology to move forward with my life. Helen texts me later that week saying Richard is starting to understand that actions have results that don't go away, that some bridges can't be rebuilt no matter how much therapy someone does. I save the text message because it feels like proof that I'm not being cruel by refusing to see him. My boss pulls me aside in March with good news. I'm being promoted again, this time to nursing supervisor with a better salary and full benefits package. She mentions I'm being looked at for management training that could lead to director positions down the road. The career I built while supporting Alex is doing well now, because I can actually focus on my own growth instead of covering someone else's bills. I accept the promotion and feel something close to pride. On a sunny April morning, I sit on my porch drinking coffee and looking at the garden space I'm planning to plant. Helen is coming over later to help me pick out flowers. James is bringing lunch. I think about how scared I was a year ago, leaving that Christmas dinner with my whole life up in the air. I'm not rich or perfect or completely healed from everything that happened, but I'm free and building something that's really mine. That's enough.